Jade's Journey Home is a News 5 special report.
Every journey begins with one single step.
But after that first step, the boundaries are endless. Good evening, I'm Charlie Lucan.
And I'm Norma Rashid. Tonight we will take you on a special journey that began here in the tri-state and led a local family across the world. The family's dream of having a child of their own has come true in the far eastern country of China.
Adoption, not a new word, but one that in today's world has no geographical limits. Now, let us take you on the journey to China, where an orphaned baby girl awaits. Reporter Mark Kaler and photographer Ron Schmidt chronicle this journey of a lifetime, one we can all share in. Tonight, Jade's Journey Home, one family story.
Robin Curlis wants a little girl. She's got the clothing, the nursery, and the promise of a baby waiting in China. These things were easy to come by. A domestic adoption was not.
We've been told that the wait would be about 6 or 7 years in Hamilton County. Well, we didn't want to wait that long.
Dennis and Robin made the decision that a foreign adoption would be best for them.
We kept telling each other, just get through the paperwork, go through the process, and in a year from now, hopefully we'll have a baby.
The judicial system is getting incarcerated for what had happened.
The paperwork is finished for now, so it's time to plan a trip halfway around the world. 12 time zones and 14 hours after leaving the U.S., the Curlises arrive in Beijing.
We found some new friends.
While sightseeing at the Great Wall of China, the Curlises themselves have become an attraction. People were lining up to have their pictures taken with Robin.
Yeah,
we want a close-up. I'm very impressed. The people of China are very hospitable. They're loving, caring, disciplined people.
It took about 3,000 years to build and rebuild the Great Wall. One of the first things you realize when you get to China is that time here has a whole different meaning.
They're all at lunch. They take long lunches in the southern part of China because it's so hot and they don't have air conditioning.
Dave Hughes is China coordinator for the Cleveland-based European Adoption Consultants. The Curlises now have joined 10 other families in Nanning, a city not far from the Vietnam border. Unlike Beijing, this is a city that many tourists never see. At first glance, they might look like tourists, but most travelers will never have the adventure that lies ahead here. They know they'll pick up their babies today. They just don't know when.
So they're at lunch till about 2:30. They're supposed to call us to let us know about what time we'll go to the orphanage to pick up the kids.
Dennis and Robin ask Dave questions and wait for 2:30. But their trip to the orphanage won't come until almost dusk.
Dennis and Robin Curlis prepared themselves for years to walk into that orphanage. They were told it would take 5 to 7 years before they could get the kind of child they wanted. After all those years, imagine the anticipation in those final moments before meeting Jade.
That's something that you'll see them experience in just a few moments. But first, let's take a brief look at some facts about adoption in the United States. Thousands of Americans adopt children each year. In Ohio alone, adoptions have increased 26% over the last 5 years. In 1995, 1,157 children were placed in Ohio homes, and many more are waiting to be placed. Even so, many Americans are turning to other countries for children, as the Curlises did. The choice is an individual one. Locally, the need is great for youngsters wanting homes. The choices are many for people seeking to adopt. Curtis Fuller takes a look at some options in the tri-state.
Adoption is about good mental health. It's about creating families in a healthy way.
You don't have to be rich. You don't have to have a big house. Just have a lot of understanding of what type of children that we have in our system.
First, there is no shortage of kids in need of homes, but many are already labeled hard to place. So adoption from a public agency is a long journey for them and often the least likely option for adults wanting a child.
Our children come with specific behaviors, unfortunately horrendous backgrounds.
Many folks have gone the route of private agencies for adoptions, like the Wesleys here in northern Kentucky. They've adopted 3 boys.
It's a long wait, but once you adopt, it's well worth it. You know, these children are supposed to be in our family.
Katie and Tom Wessling wanted children but were unable to conceive despite fertility drugs. That's when their journey for a child led them to a private adoption agency.
The core of our program really is counseling for people who are preparing to adopt.
Adoptive parents like Tom and Katie go through a series of classes, a background check, and are chosen by the birth parent. Under this type of custody, the adoptive parents take their new babies home straight from the hospital. Tom and Katie waited between 3 and 5 years for son Alex, who's now 9 years old. The wait for Brett, who's now 6, was much shorter, only 9 months. And they say the wait for their newest family member, 1-year-old Jordan, was about 2 years. The cost at a private agency for a child can range anywhere from $5,500 to just over $10,000. Public agencies don't charge a fee. It normally takes less time to adopt, but remember the children being placed are older, minority, and have gone through trauma in their short lives.
Private agencies normally deal with healthy white infants. Unfortunately, we don't get those.
The common denominators are patience and love.
And we feel like our family is a perfectly normal situation. And like I said, it wasn't formed the same way as lots of other families, but we're happy with it.
Adoption, of course, is not for everyone. It takes great patience to endure the process. But the time spent ensures that public agencies and independent providers follow all the procedures, both for the state and the county probate courts where the adoptions are finalized.
Many who seek adoption overseas are turning to the People's Republic of China. Last year alone, 2,800 adoptions were completed by Americans in that country. This year, the figure is expected to top 4,000. It may be difficult to understand why so many Chinese babies, particularly little girls, are orphaned. In this communist country, it is a simple solution to a complex problem. China has 5 times as many people as the United States in about the same land area. Even by American standards, the cities are clogged with traffic and thick smog. Modern office towers rise within feet of open sewers. The villagers face challenges too. For this nation to just feed 1.2 billion people is a challenge. Today, people work the fields just as their ancestors did 200 years ago. That's one reason why China imposes severe government sanctions on most families who have more than one child. If the policy is violated, job and housing opportunities can vanish. The result is a birth rate similar to the United States. Many families who accept the restriction hope their firstborn are boys. That's because both China's law and culture favor males. Little girls are abandoned in large numbers. Dave Hughes of European Adoption Consultants says reports of abuse in Chinese orphanages have been grossly overblown in the West. However, he also says that without foreign adoptions, prospects for the girls would be limited at best.
Maybe the girls are going to prostitution. There's no way to really tell what's going to happen 12, 13, 14 years from now.
The orphanage will employ many of the children who are not eventually adopted. But that is not a good solution since there are more orphans than jobs available.
After thousands of air miles and the trip to Nanning, they have yet to arrive at Mother's Love Orphanage.
The long-awaited union for Robin, Dennis, and Jade when we come back.
Jade's journey home will return in a moment.
From Beijing to Nanning, 1,200 miles.
But before they make the trip to Mother's Love Orphanage, there are many questions. The most urgent concern the health of the babies and care that they've received.
Some places do give shot records. It doesn't necessarily mean they've gotten those shots.
Even though
they're required that they do. Sometimes they just say they did.
At long last, they have arrived. The anticipation for 11 families, including the Curlises, is understandable. The nervous group, with much hope, prepares to enter the orphanage. They know the next few moments will change their lives forever. Soon, mother, father, and child will be united. Mark Kaler and Ron Schmidt bring us, in words and pictures, the almost indescribable event.
Colors, please.
They wait patiently as each family signs an adoption document. They listen politely to a lecture about the orphanage and what the staff expects of them.
Your gratitude care for the child's needs until the child reaches 18 years of age.
The tension builds with each passing formality. And then, at last, the first child enters. She will be called Claire. Her father has traveled alone here from Silver Lake, Ohio.
She instantly turned away from me and wanted to go back. And for at least a half hour, she cried steadily along with all the other kids.
One by one, the children enter, and with each entry, the crying increases.
Being thrust to us was pretty intense for her. She was pretty scared.
Robin Curlis laughs nervously. She and Dennis have been watching the scene unfold around them for about 20 minutes now. Finally, their moment arrives. Immediately, Jade is crying too. Dennis's first attempt to hold her is rebuffed.
Yeah, we were just waiting to see what her reaction would be. It was like everybody else's. I mean, all the other babies, they were just crying and...
Yeah, one baby started crying and then all the babies started crying.
Like a chain reaction.
Let's give her that toy.
But nothing seems to please Jade. Even holding her is a struggle.
But it was great seeing Jade for the first time. You know, we saw that she was healthy and that made a big difference to us.
Orphanage workers call Jade by her Chinese name, Lin Bao, which means special treasure. In another room, a couple is still waiting for their baby. They know she will come, but waiting takes its toll. Outside, another scene. Foster mothers who have cared for their children since birth prepare for a painful goodbye.
You may be asking yourself, how can a country so willingly part with its own children?
When we come back, a look at Chinese culture and the painful parting of foster child from foster mother.
Not every country requires adoptive parents to visit their new child's homeland. In South Korea, children are sent to their new home to be received by their adoptive parents.
The process and procedure vary depending on the country, but in most cases, the People's Republic of China does require parents to visit. They see the trip as a final way to observe the commitment of adoptive parents. They know that an understanding of the child's heritage will be learned and experienced by the adoptive parents over the course of their stay. You can learn the ancient art of Tai Chi in the United States, but there's nothing quite like joining 300 Chinese adherents at dawn in a city park half a world away. You can read about the history of the Great Wall, but you won't appreciate what it took to build this ancient wonder until you walk on it. Then there are the people of China.
They would come up and talk with us, and especially the little kids. The little kids were just as sweet as can be.
You might not associate kite flying with Tiananmen Square either. It's a complex society full of contradiction. These experiences might explain why the adoption procedure in China requires a visit. For everyone, there are lots of observations and questions.
Before you come to China, don't you have any preparation?
There are the other common inquiries. Will you teach the baby about Chinese culture? Will she learn the language? These may seem modest questions when compared to the political rhetoric of Mao's Cultural Revolution just a generation ago. Today, Western influence is increasing, as is a sense of responsibility for the nation's orphans.
They all should be offered for a home life with a mother and a father who offers them the opportunity to make something of themselves throughout their life.
The door stays open most of the time, like the entrance to the once forbidden city. Many on both sides pray it never closes again. Some Americans we encountered in China had been in the country for more than 3 weeks, waiting for paperwork to be processed. The Curlises and other families in their party were home within about 2 weeks. What would it be like when the foster child and foster parent are separated?
The question was asked by the adoptive parents, but no one was prepared. Witness now what was the most difficult and emotional moment for Dennis and Robin Curlis as they see deep bonds broken. Mark Kaler reports.
Moments ago, this child was separated from the only family she's known. Now she clings to what's familiar. Most of these girls have been in a foster mother's care since the early weeks of their lives. Their new parents arrive at the orphanage as a group. The girls arrive a few at a time. So as emotional instructions are made inside, an equally poignant scene plays in the parking lot. Hair is fixed. Last-minute thirsts are quenched. In another corner, they're putting on an ethnic hat or fresh diapers. Foster mothers putting their best feet forward. None of the foster mothers sees the documents completed, but they sense their roles are fading with the sunlight. Jade and Robin board the bus, and they know their job has been completed.
That's the foster mother outside right there.
We were almost positive that they would be attached, to the foster parents when we first went there. But we didn't expect it to be that intense.
And it was a very moving experience. All the children were crying. All the mothers were crying. Probably half the fathers were crying.
Through the tears, one foster mother gives instructions. Another pushes closer for a final glance.
I was real touched. I mean, the foster parent was right there with her hand on the window, and little Ashley was right there and just touching hands, basically.
She would get no closer. The tears continue until one man can bear it no longer. It's time to go.
It was difficult for me. I didn't speak for a good 5 minutes and wouldn't have even attempted to speak because of the lump in my throat from the scene.
Robin Curlis and the other parents knew their new babies had been abandoned. This farewell scene also taught them the girls were not unloved.
And I don't think you can ask for better people in the whole world. They took very good care of the girls.
It's all quiet now. It's okay.
By the time the families arrive at their Nanning hotel, the babies have no more tears to cry. But in this relative calm, Dennis Curlis and the other new parents have a lot to think about. Early in the day, they'd agreed to visit the foster mothers' homes. In the next few days, many will reconsider that decision.
There is yet another encounter for the Curlises with Jade's foster mother.
When we come back, the emotional visit to the foster home. Plus,
in our next segment, we'll take a closer look at all the paperwork and bureaucracy involved in adopting a child here. It might be easier than the United States, but it still has its ups and downs. We'll take a look at that when we come back.
Adopting a baby takes great patience, and much of that patience is required to get through all that paperwork.
A foreign adoption doubles the documentation required. And as Dennis and Robin Curlis discovered, the Chinese are very fond of formalities.
How you doing, Louis?
Dennis and Robin Curlis have hired a cab driver to show them Beijing. It's late August. They were supposed to arrive here 2 months ago, but the trip was delayed 3 times by log jams of paperwork here in the capital.
You're dealing with bureaucrats who, you know, they're not sitting at the orphanage. They don't see the kids. They don't see what's really going on.
Adoptive parents don't even travel to China until a long checklist of paperwork is done stateside. The Curlises took all the waiting in stride.
If you're willing to stick with the paperwork and get it all done in a year, it's over.
Families usually travel in small groups to China. The Curlises entered in Beijing. From here, it's off to the child's hometown. In our case, that was Nanning, capital of the Guangxi Autonomous Region. That's a part of China set aside for ethnic minorities. Nanning has roughly the same importance as a state capital in the U.S.
Mrs. Gu is director of the registration office here, and she's very busy today.
This is the civil office, much like our Department of Human Services. All that's required here is simple reassurance that the children are going to good homes.
It's called Sharonville. Lots of families and parks and schools.
Other families wait their turns. An hour later,
Dennis and Robin.
everyone is approved. More fancy documents, a Chinese specialty, then on to the next office.
Here we go.
Now it's the justice office, a sort of notary. Our camera is excluded here. Parents tell us questions are more pointed, but again, each adoption is approved. For now, the girls are still Chinese citizens, and so they'll need Chinese passports to enter the United States. In fact, they can't even leave Nanning without them. Application is made Thursday. Not enough time to be ready before the weekend. 2 more days in Nanning.
Whatever happens, happens. Whenever our agent or the translator tell us we're going to go somewhere or do something else, we're just ready to go.
You get them?
It's Monday. The passports are ready. We head to the airport for the 45-minute flight to Guangzhou, a city better known in the West as Canton. Guangzhou has the population of Chicago, the smog and traffic of Los Angeles, and the humidity of Miami. Nonetheless, this is a great place for these families to be because it represents the final stop before they go home. Guangzhou is home to the U.S. consulate, where the girls will get entry visas. But here, too, there will be delays. And this time, that will mean some tough group decisions.
Although the paperwork takes a good deal of work, it's not as daunting as it appears. But there are certain things that must be done.
In a few minutes, Caroline Thal will give us a crash course on the bureaucratic procedure for adopting a child overseas.
For the Curlises, the most difficult moments are not wrapped in the red tape, but in emotion. Following the emotional goodbye at the orphanage, a difficult question remains. Should they risk another difficult encounter by visiting the foster mother?
Who doesn't want to meet the foster mother? That means everybody does?
At first, it seemed like a wonderful idea. A translator would accompany adoptive parents and their new children to the homes of their foster mothers. One golden opportunity to ask questions about the baby's health, her needs, and maybe her background. It's been a few days now since this difficult goodbye scene, and second thoughts remain.
You take it a day at a time, and big strides come in surprisingly great leaps.
No one wanted to risk untying the bonds 3 days had developed.
She was sitting on
Sit on my lap, and
on your lap, and she cranked out a little smile.
Yeah.
And then it was probably the 4th day that we actually heard a laugh.
Rather than waste a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, most families decided to send one parent without the baby to visit the foster mother. They learned quickly that everyday life in a Chinese apartment is much different than at home. Grocery shopping's a good example. Here in China, a modern supermarket with frozen vegetables probably would be a lonely place. These folks prefer their vegetables fresh out of the field, and they usually only buy enough for one night. They'll be back again tomorrow to buy more. And once inside the foster mother's home, it was hard not to notice the modest kitchen or the one bed Jade and other family members had shared. But soon, those initial impressions were replaced by an overwhelming sense that Jade had been an honored guest. Robin begins asking questions. The answers are sincere, although short on specifics.
Your baby is very cute and yeah, play very well.
Good, she does play well. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about how to comfort her? Okay, so she likes toys that make sounds. Okay.
Then, moments Robin is unlikely to forget. First, a small recent picture of Jade emerges from a family album.
I can take that? Thank you.
Then there is one more gift, an item that shows Jade's foster mother took time to learn about Cincinnati. The item has been kept under lock and key. Tropical Nanning is not a place where winter snowsuits are easy to buy. Shishi is thank you, the only Chinese most Americans learn here. Outside, a translator helped us with one final question: how she felt the day Jade was adopted.
It's quite upset because she was retired, and right now she's, is quite alone, in the family. So she wants a baby with her, but she's okay.
Staff members at Mothers Love Orphanage say the foster homes are closely supervised, but not all orphanages in China use the same system. It's important to note that American adoption agencies rate Mothers Love among China's best.
There is irony in China. Although unwanted children are put up for adoption, you'll see that the Chinese have an intense interest on how the baby should be cared for.
And the Curlises have their baby now, but their adjustment is just beginning. When we return, we'll report on adoptive parents and children who made those adjustments years ago.
Good job.
The Chinese take great pride in their history. Tradition and family legacies are cherished.
With that in mind, you might think that some people may resent Americans taking their young people out of the country. We found out the opposite is true.
Dennis Curlis made some new friends in China by practicing the ancient art of Tai Chi. Many Chinese believe it clears the mind and strengthens the spirit as a new day begins. At the end of this session, the Tai Chi master asks Dennis to address the group.
We have traveled far to adopt her, and we feel that the Chinese people are the most hospitable people in the world. You can tell looking in their eyes, they mean what they're saying, and they're not just playing a game with you.
They're just in awe in the smaller cities of seeing Americans and seeing foreigners, and they're just very friendly and very helpful.
Want an example? Watch this man as he encounters the Curlises on a Nanning sidewalk. In this ancient land, long wary of foreigners, kindness seems to rise from the people like the smoke from their altars.
The old and the new mingle easily here in China. I'm standing on the grounds of a Buddhist temple that's about 1,400 years old. But if you look off in the distance, you'll see 70-story skyscrapers that would fit into any American skyline.
Old and young alike seem thrilled by the prospect of Americans making a better life for children who otherwise would be at risk. Chance encounters with admirers occur daily.
Say hello.
Finneytown native Ruth Gardner now speaks as a Guangzhou resident.
Those are the lucky ones that get to go home and go to a nice place. So it makes us feel nice to be able to see that. But we see it all the time, almost every day.
And on each day of the Curlises' trip, they've encountered admiration that transcends the language barrier. Add a translator, and they even drew some applause.
We want to bring her back to Nanning when she's a little older so she can meet everybody again.
We're told by other groups who've adopted in China that the Curlises' experience in Nanning is typical of what goes on in other cities.
As the Curlises begin adjusting to their new life, they'll no doubt rely on the support and insight of other families who've had more time to adjust. Rebecca Haynes shows us there are plenty of issues to consider.
Gentle,
Let me
Amy.
cake on Bailey's head.
Don't make cake on Bailey's head. We'll do it together, okay?
They do a lot together. Families with Children from China is an organized group that meets regularly for fun and support in making the adjustment to American life with a Chinese-born child.
Right now, I think with the children being so young, it's more of a support for the parents.
Changzhou, they're both from Changzhou. That is neat.
I'm
really excited.
But as the girls get older, I think it'll be really important for them to have other children that have families that are made up the same way that their family is made up.
So, Mom, how old are you?
The child-raising issues, as with all children, vary from family to family. When Barb and Brent Gamble brought Bailey home at a year old, she had already begun absorbing the Chinese culture and had to make a transition.
For somebody who didn't hear anything but Chinese until she was 13 months and who was speaking a few words of Chinese, she has, totally blossomed.
When you were a baby, where did you live? In China.
Yeah?
Born in China.
You were born in China. Then what happened? Can you forget?
Actually like a big girl.
Then you turned into a big girl.
There can be physical adjustments as well, some scarier than others, as Mary Lou Burling found out with her daughter, Monica.
All of the babies in our group seemed to have low-grade fevers and coughs, which was not uncommon being in the orphanages. But 24 hours after we got her, she had a really high fever and ended up having febrile seizures. But once she was able to be treated with, antibiotics and things, she responded well to that.
Development can be a bit behind as well.
When Hope came home with us, she was 7 months old and she could barely hold her head up. Immediately started rolling and tumbling and crawling. I mean, they just catch up very quickly.
Good job.
They grow into life like any other child in America.
She loves Pooh Bear and Barney and Big Bird. Her favorite movie is Big Bird in China.
One thing that does differentiate children who are adopted in China is the very fact that their beginnings are in China. Foremost in the minds of their American parents is to keep these kids in touch with the Chinese culture.
Yeah, want some rice?
That's been probably the biggest attraction for us, is that when we decided to adopt internationally, we wanted to make sure that we were going to have a child whose culture that we could embrace, that could be ours.
Just a few weeks ago, there was a moon festival that we celebrated with our larger group, and then I had some of my nephews over and we celebrated them with little moon cakes. So I plan to do the Chinese holidays.
A few of these children are lucky enough to have a specific connection to their past, however small, but for most, the future is what they have.
The other night I went to bed and I cried for her mother because she's never going to be able to see her grow up. And I'd gone in to check on her and just standing over her bed, it's like, your mom's going to miss out on so much, but I'm so lucky to have you.
These families get together several times a year. As new parents, they're fortunate to have one another to talk to and share common experiences. Since 1988, the number of Chinese orphans adopted by American parents has increased 65%.
Now the emotional visit to the foster mother is behind them.
At last, the Curlises prepare for the return trip home. But first, some work remains to be done.
As you've been watching all of this, maybe you're wondering how you could adopt a baby from China or some other foreign country. We'll give you a crash course on how it works when we come back.
Adopting a baby from China or another foreign country is not for everyone, but it does involve a lot of patience.
That said, the Curlis family and others interviewed for this report tell us they did not find the process especially difficult. Caroline Thaw gives us a brief look at what's required and what to expect.
Parents wanting to adopt foreign-born babies work on a checklist of items in the first phase of paperwork. They'll need certified birth certificates. In the case of China, the government prefers the maturity of parents at least 35 years of age. Single parents are considered, but if married, a license must be produced, along with a financial statement and most recent tax return. You'll also need a medical exam for each parent. proof of a clean criminal record, letters of reference and employment, and an approved home study. That's a detailed report about your family and lifestyle prepared by a licensed social service agency.
It sounds like a long list, but those are standard requirements you'd be given before entering any U.S. courthouse to adopt a baby. The next step, translating those documents and making sure they meet legal requirements in the baby's home country.
Adoption agencies and foreign governments consider the parent's gender and age preferences before a child is matched with a family.
You want more?
Families receive a referral that briefly describes the child and includes a picture. Travel plans are made with the assistance of the adoption agency. Costs vary by agency and country. Expect to pay between $7,000 and $11,000 in fees, plus U.S. immigration costs, and you'll need passports too. You'll also have several $1,000s worth of incidental expenses. Again, this varies greatly. Expect to pay about $5,000 in travel expenses per couple. Total costs in the $14,000 to $20,000 range are common. But again, remember, they vary widely.
Time restraints prevent us from detailing all the requirements. However, the agency that prepared the Curless family's adoption is conducting a seminar in Cincinnati tomorrow afternoon. Representatives from European adoption consultants will be at the Regal Hotel on 5th Street between 1 and 4 p.m.
It took about 2 weeks for the Curlesses to complete all the paperwork and return home with little Jade. But other American groups in China had been overseas for 3 weeks or more. As the Curlesses neared the end of their trip, they were also beginning to see some changes in Jade.
In a Nanning hotel room, 11 newly adopted girls celebrate a collective first birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
It isn't one of Jade's best moments, but she's already shown a desire to go home with the Curlesses. For many of the other babies, that bonding occurred at this party.
She's smiling now, and she smiled for the first time today.
If you'd told me 3 days ago that we'd be sitting here having this party, I would have bet a large amount of money against that.
It's another step in the baby's journey home. So is leaving their native city of Nanning.
She's waving goodbye.
Dennis does his best impression of Richard Nixon. But unlike the former president, this odyssey doesn't end with a wave at the airport. In fact, this day is far from over. Moments after our evening arrival in Guangzhou, the families are off to get visa photos taken. The idea is to have as much done as possible to expedite the process at the U.S. consulate. Early the next morning, the required medical exams. Eyes and ears are checked. It's little more than a quick look for obvious problems.
Okay, 71.
Now everyone is ready for the consulate, but the reverse is not true. Under new anti-terrorism policies, American-born workers must process visas. No one suspects these babies of being terrorists, but no one is willing to bend the rules either. There are waiting lists for the few dozen appointments scheduled each day.
The U.S. consulate here in Guangzhou is just down the street, but we can't show it to you for security reasons. No photography allowed. Dennis went inside, though, to a room where everybody waited for their visas. He took our camera with him.
This is the one room where parents can shoot videotape. Our 11 families are split into 3 smaller groups. 2 groups have already been here, allowed by the last group to go first because of greater needs to get home. Dennis and Robin are thinking about home too, but not exclusively.
Gonna do it again?
We might. We talked about it. We talked about it. We're not even out of China yet, and we're thinking about coming back.
Once the interview was completed, it took the consulate a full business day to process the visa application. The Curlesses were interviewed on a Friday, so they had to wait through the weekend and most of Monday before they could leave.
Soon, the journey home begins. After 3 stops and more than 20 hours of travel, a joyous homecoming when the Curlesses touch home soil.
And a visit tonight with Robin, Dennis, and Jade, and Mark Kaler and Ron Schmidt, who brought us this remarkable story. When the Curlises first took Jade to their hotel, it was pretty obvious she had never taken an elevator ride.
She was terrified in closed spaces. This did not bode well for the flight home.
Northwest Airlines announces the arrival of flight number 1437, nonstop service from Minneapolis, St. Paul.
A crowd gathers in the terminal.
Who's coming, President Clinton?
A closer look at the banners tells us these folks have come for a first glance at Jade. It's showtime, and despite a 20-hour plane ride, she does not disappoint. She's walking, smiling, even waving at her new relatives.
Wow.
Just 3 months ago, in our first interviews with Dennis and Robin, they were trying to stay in the right frame of mind.
We were afraid to get our hopes up too high because we thought that, at any time something could go wrong.
Now, those fears are gone.
The first night we got her home, we took her up in her room, and she stood by the doorway and just looked inside as if she knew that that was her room.
Back in June, Dennis could only see Jade in his mind's eye.
I see her every day, and I think about her when I wake up, think about her when I go to sleep, think about what she's doing.
But now, that curiosity and love has spanned 10,000 miles.
She likes to spend a lot of time with us, as much as she can. She likes to lay on the bed and just hold us and just be with us all the time. That's what she likes.
3 lives have changed forever.
This is really a remarkable story, and the Curlises now join us from their Sharonville home.
They're joined by reporter Mark Kaler and photographer Ron Schmidt.
Robin, Dennis, and Jade, thank you for joining us tonight. And Robin, let's start with you. What kind of an adjustment has this been for your family? There she is.
Well, for Jade, it's been an easy adjustment, I think, relatively. She's adjusted to the food. She likes French fries and pizza and cheeseburgers.
So you had very little information, from what I understand, about Jade. Did that worry you at all?
No, it didn't bother. It didn't worry us at all. We had a picture of her. We had a photograph of her, and we were just excited about going over there and picking her up.
You had a couple of people accompany you from Channel 5, Ron and Mark. Ron and Mark, what kind of experience was this for you?
Well, what impressed us the most were the people. They were absolutely fantastic. They were friendly. They were hospitable. They were as curious about us as we were about them. And they really seemed genuinely happy to see us as Americans in their country.
Absolutely. One thing that really stayed with me, too, is their desire for better relations with the West. They really were interested. We even talked about it with one group at one point. And I think Dennis raised a good point with them when he said that the things that happened back in the 70s and the 80s to sort of open up China led to something like this, a beautiful adoption. And hopefully we'll see more of that as time goes on.
Well, Robin, Dennis, and Jade, if we could see her one more time, we thank you for joining us tonight.
Jade's being a typical, typical baby.
She is a doll baby.
Thank you.
Thank you. She's cute.
Oops.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Now, Mark Kaler and Ron Schmidt, we also want to thank them. They went through quite a bit getting this incredible story.
They sure did. If you would like more information on tomorrow's seminar on adoption in China or other foreign adoptions, visit us on our website. That's http://www.WLWT.com.
We're glad you could be with us tonight as we watch the Curlis family fulfill their dream.
It's proof that anything is possible as long as you have the patience and the determination to see your dreams through.
Of course, we wish the Curlises all the best in the future. We thank them for letting us share their special story.
And from all of us here at Channel 5, good night.